Please.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Brown and councillors. Thank you for the invitation to present to you. My name is Bob Gallagher. I'm on the Tennis PEI Board of Directors. And to my left is Adam Clark, who is the Director of Facilities for Canada Games. And on my right is Brian Hall, who's our Executive Director for Tennis PEI. So,
Can I just introduce, do we want to do a quick introduce of ourselves? Do you know us?
Sure, that would be great.
Come here.
Councillor McLeod, Ward 2.
Yep.
Eleni Enkoff, Ward 1.
Frederick Bard, Ward 7.
Wayne Long, Immense Development Officer.
Okay.
Jason Cody, Ward 8.
Terry Bedard, best ward.
You're 7 too.
Council.
I thought
Ward 10.
Mike says this.
Yeah, I know, Mike's really nice. but anyway.
Actually, McCabe, of course, Ward 9.
Mike Duffy, Councillor Garden of Eden.
There you go.
I'm Kevin Ramsey, Ward 5.
And Councillor Duran is online here, Bob.
Okay.
He's phoning in.
Okay.
Councillor Duran, Ward, what is it? Ward 6?
Ward 6, Your Worship.
And Mr. Kelly is our CAO.
Great.
So he's the guy right here. He's Philip Rensider.
Just as a time check, Mayor Brown, how much time do we have? I think
Well, Mr. Kelly said 10 minutes, but we'll go times 2.
20 minutes?
Yeah. Is that all right? Or is that you want me more?
Okay, I'll get through it. Anyway, okay, thank you. What we wanted to talk to you about is a proposal for the Charlottetown Racket Center. And so this is a project that Tennis PEI has been looking at for indoor tennis courts for the last couple of years, and Squash PEI has been looking at for the last couple of years, but neither one of us have been able to put together a proper business case. And so it's only been in the last 6 months that things have really changed for a number of reasons why we think this proposal has some legs at this stage of the game. The first issue, or first reason, is this past summer we saw an unbelievable number of people playing tennis at Victoria Park. So Charlottetown Tennis Club has done an amazing job of increasing their membership. They've gone from 146 the previous year to 200 this past year. So there's been a huge demand. We've also had a lot of coaches that have been trained that are also teaching at Victoria Park, which is causing a few issues, but the issue, it's a good problem to have because there's demand. And then we have recreational people playing as well. And so there's been a huge demand for the courts at Victoria Park. The second issue that came up is the fact that once COVID hit, we only have 2 courts in all of PEI at the spa. And Colin, for COVID reasons, had to move some of his equipment on one of the courts. So now we're down to 1 indoor tennis court. And then the last thing that happened was that we realized Canada Games was coming in 2023, and also that Canada Games offered up Squash PEI $500,000 for 4 indoor court facilities. And so we took a look and saying, well, with all of these resources, including Tennis Canada providing $250,000 to Tennis PEI for the construction of 4 indoor courts, perhaps we could put together our resources and in fact have a good proposal for a Charlottetown Racket Center. There's a fourth reason I'll talk about why, which really makes this thing work. So that's what we want to talk about, Charlottetown Racket Center. And talking quickly about the growth of tennis, we mentioned Victoria Park. We talked about the increased growth of tennis lessons with the number of available coaches here. We have a lack of outdoor facilities due to demand at Victoria Park. We have some courts in Stratford, and there's some that are being utilized in Summerside as well. But overall, we still need more courts for the demand in tennis. I mentioned the indoor facilities, currently only 1 court available for all of PEI. And Tennis Canada, the recommendation overall for Canada is 1 tennis court per every 10,000 people. So we are really don't have enough tennis courts in terms of indoor courts. The other part of it that is important is the sport tourism. And this is a $3.6 billion industry in Canada. And it's one of the largest growing areas within the tourism industry that I'll talk a little bit more about as well. Some of the things that tennis offers that Tennis Canada has put together for their provincial organizations is, the first one is tennis is gender balanced. Now, if you ask me if these characteristics were something that we'd see in Charlottetown 5 years ago, probably not. But over the last 5 years, a lot of things have changed with the demographics associated with Charlottetown. We're seeing a lot more, both men and women playing tennis. It's a sport for life. It's a safe sport. It's affordable. It's accessible. We're also seeing tennis as being a sport for new Canadians. And so, again, you can see that at Victoria Park in the summer. Okay? So a lot of new Canadians coming on board play tennis. And it's certainly one of the best forms to improve cardiovascular health. And the one I'm really expecting is that's going to improve my life or extend my life by 9.7 years. So I'll let you know how that goes at some point. So, but it's a great sport to be involved in. Taking a quick look at squash, there's currently 150 players in PEI, 8 courts in total, only 4 in good shape. 2 are in Mill River and 2 in Charlottetown. Now, none have extensive viewing capabilities, and the requirements for Canada Games is that they need 4 courts with the ability to have an audience. And so, as a result, none of them have it. And currently, 80% of the membership play in Charlottetown for squash PEI. Canada Games, as I mentioned, $500,000 for 4 squash courts, and sport tourism, again, is something that squash PEI is looking forward to taking advantage of with these indoor facilities. This is the 4th item that really hit home to me, and this is the growth of pickleball. And it's the fastest growing sport in North America, and over 16,000 pickleball are registered members in Canada, and in PEI we have 700 people playing pickleball. Now, they don't have an organization yet, but when I went on their website, you can see pickleball clubs, Montague, Charlottetown, Stratford, Tignish. They have one in the in Stanhope, in the facility, in the community center in Stanhope. So they're all over, and typically what you're seeing is many seniors taking up the sport. So and there's lack of facilities. So talking to the folks in Charlottetown and Cornwall, they have to turn away members because they don't have enough facilities. They utilize the schools or the community centers, and they set up portable temporary courts. The court utilization during non-prime time complements what we're talking about in terms of a racket facility. Typically, tennis clubs have prime time and non-prime time, and prime time is really busy, non-prime is not. You add pickleball, you now have a lot of people using it between 9 and 4 o'clock, 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Okay? It has been shown, there's a study out of Colorado showing improved blood pressure and cardiorespiratory fitness for these pickleball players, and a study in Japan showing lower levels of depression and, with the social connections, better mental health. Sport tourism, again, is a very important part of this, and I'll mention this when we talk more specifically about some of the opportunities with pickleball. So our vision is this: to be a world-class center for sports development for the province. It's a not-for-profit center. Will include 4 hardcore tennis courts, 4 squash courts, 4 international standard pickleball courts, and the facility will provide the continuum of tennis, squash, and pickleball from children to adults, seniors, and all persons, including those with disability, and it will serve as the center for development of high-performance athletes in all 3 sports. And a potential site for hosting local, provincial, and national tournaments in all 3 disciplines. Okay? So what does it look like? So we started off with an initial design that was similar to this, that was out of the Southeast Racket Club in Dieppe that they were going to build for the Francophone Games. Now, they're still looking at funding. It was a much larger footprint. After discussing with Adam, we decided that we may want to make this smaller. They had racquetball courts. We obviously changed them to squash courts. And so we have this as follows. Oops, sorry. We have 4 tennis courts. I don't know if this shows up. 4 tennis courts and 8 pickleball courts. And with the dimensions of the area required for a tennis court, you can put exactly 4 pickleball courts in 1 tennis court. Okay? We have 4 squash courts at the bottom with bleachers, a wall, and bleachers looking over the tennis courts. Okay. And then along the side here, we have areas for HVAC. We have areas for universal washroom and change room. We could put in a cafe. We could put in a pro shop, offices, and then we have an elevator to a mezzanine. Now, what we liked about this area in this schematic is that it's an open concept. Okay. So right now, I don't know if I'm showing this here. From this point over, it would be 186 feet. From here, it's 246 feet. Basically, that's all an open area. And we mentioned to Adam and the Canada Games folks, this is what needs to be built for Canada Games, but we don't need to put a tennis facility or a tennis surface on this until after the games. So now you've got a 50-some-odd thousand square foot area that could be utilized at any point for the Canada Games. Okay? And so that is available. The other part of it is available is that not only after the Canada Games, this area can still be, once the tennis courts go down, the posts are removable, the nets are removable, and could be utilized for any other type of facility or any event that the city or the province may want to host. Okay. So one of the other things that we want to mention though is that these 4 courts can then obviously be changed to 6 courts. And these 8 courts here can be changed to 24 pickleball courts. And the Canadian Pickleball Association is very active, and they have national events going back and forth between Western and Eastern Canada. So Western Canada is 2021, it's back to East 2022, West 2023, it'll be back to the East in 2024. They get over 200 and 250 people coming to these events. And so all of this would allow that type of activity. We'd also have an elevator to a mezzanine, and then on the mezzanine we would have a 40-foot by 310-foot, and working with an architect friend of ours, we decided that we'd have a mezzanine going across for viewing of the tennis courts and also viewing of the squash courts. One of the things the squash PEI folks liked was having this open area. Initially it was on one side, but we put it on both, because typically if you're watching squash, you can only watch it from the rear end, see what's going on in front of you. In this case, what we thought we would be able to do is put glass on the wall for this court as well as on the far court, so that there'd be more viewing area for a championship game. So you'd have 2 squash courts that would have clear glass on one side. Okay? And this would be about 15,000 square feet. Again, configured to whatever we felt is necessary. Put a restaurant or a lounge up there, depending on what the requirements were from the stakeholders. The benefits we've talked about briefly already: increase the City of Charlottetown leisure recreational options, opportunity to engage in lifelong learning and develop skills. Programs and camps are very important, and we'll talk about that when we address the business case. The center also addresses emerging community recreational needs and improves the City of Charlottetown community amenities. And high quality programs in all 3 disciplines, regardless of age, ability, gender, culture, allowing everybody to participate. Economic benefits: increased traffic to the downtown area, and we'll talk a little bit about the site in a minute. Increased opportunity through hosting the tourism PEI, or the sport tourism business, as I mentioned, a $3.6 billion business in Canada. And the center, because it's all year round, will be able to employ additional youth, general managers, instructors, camps counselors, facility operators, maintenance, etc. Okay. Finally, the health and wellness benefits, and this is something that I've mentioned to Mayor Brown as well as to the province, is that, I mean, we spend an awful lot on healthcare. Like 33% of the budget currently goes to healthcare, and at some point, I mean, it's great to have hospitals and doctors, but we're always in a reactive mode. At some point, we have to get proactive in terms of increasing the health of the community. And pickleball has been doing that with a lot of the seniors. Tennis continues to do that, and squash as well. So all of these have documented health benefits, but also the fun and social aspects increase the mental health welfare of everybody as well. All 3 sports can be enjoyed by everybody and improve physical health for the community by improved mental health. Okay. How would this work? So it's a nonprofit. What we would suggest is that we'd have a board of directors made up of each of the stakeholders: tennis PEI, squash PEI, pickleball PEI when they establish association, the city, and the province. They would then in turn hire a general manager who would then be responsible for running the club and doing all the programming. So how does this work? And it's great to have these facilities being built, but if they don't run themselves or self-sufficient at some point afterwards, it's not helping anyone. And the taxpayers are not happy having a white elephant sitting there as well. So we spent some time putting through an extensive business case, and Brian's got some more detail on the business case that we can pass out just to give you a little more detail. And I won't go through all of it, but it just gives you an idea of how we got those numbers, okay? So the detail, these are the summary in terms of membership fees, prime, non-prime summer camps. But you can see the details with the financials are there. And on the back, the second page, are the assumptions, okay? So the assumptions that go into putting together the business case for the financials. So the assumptions, for example, and I won't go through every line item, but for example, for the membership fees, we have year one of $80,000. Now, how did we get that? Specifically, Tennis Canada says that for every indoor court, you have 100 potential members. Okay, so let's assume we have 400 members for this facility. For pickleball, we assumed that we would have 50 potential members. For squash, the same, 50. So all that together is 100 potential members. We said, we think we can get 40% or 400 members. We then talked to the pickleball folks who are a little more cost conscious than, say, tennis or squash in terms of membership, because they play free at the community centers, right? What would be a good membership fee to charge? And we threw out the number $200 a year. And they said, well, that would work. So we put in $200 for a membership fee to belong to the racket club. So 200 times 400 is $80,000. So that's how we got that. Then we have a number of spreadsheets talking about the utilization for prime and non-prime. So prime, we used at the beginning, year one, 60% utilization for prime in terms of utilization of the courts during the prime time hours, which are 4 to 10, and on the weekends, and 50% for non-prime. Now, the Tennis Professional Association says that on average in Canada, 70% of the clubs that they've solicited and surveyed have 80% utilization for prime time. And 63% of the clubs say they have 60% for utilization for non-prime time. So these are, we think, pretty conservative numbers. Then we have summer camps, and again, we thought that this is a really good opportunity to, again, provide to the community. So it's great to have summer camps that are at Victoria Park, but the biggest problem for parents and counselors is when it rains. So now we have an opportunity to have a summer camp all year round during the summer, and the kids can also not enjoy just tennis, but they can be potentially exposed to squash as well as pickleball. Programs and lessons are a big line item, and as well as we just put in other in terms of if we decided or if there's an opportunity to rent out the space of that 1 acre space that's available. So the expenses, you can see the breakdown in terms of staffing, administration, third-party payments. We would look at this as an online facility. People would book online and pay online. And so obviously there's a payment associated with that, and then the costs associated with the summer camps for counselors. So you put all that together, we have revenue, expenses, and we think it's a pretty good business proposition for a nonprofit. And those were conservative numbers that we put in there, okay? From year 1 to 5. So how much is it going to cost? We're looking at 68,700 square feet. Talking to the architects that did the ATC, which was just opened in Bedford, which you may have seen the press release, they're about $150 a square foot. So this potential racket center would be $10.3 million, okay, for 68,000 square feet. How are we going to fund it? Well, Tennis Canada has $250,000. Squash and the Canada Games said they'd fund $500,000. We thought protection of the city of Charlottetown would be $2 million, the province of PEI 3, ACOA 4. Looking at private donors and sponsors, a total of $500,000 to get approximately $10.25 million. Okay. Now, I met with the province yesterday, and one of their, and maybe Adam can talk to this better than I can, but one of their comments was perhaps the better funding option may be through the infrastructure program. And so John Morrison, who I met yesterday, said that perhaps that might be an alternative in terms of funding. So whether the city makes an application, and then the province and then the federal government can take a look at the application for it through the infrastructure program. So that's what we'd be looking at. But certainly we may have opportunities for even higher in terms of sponsors. They did at the ATC, but we were somewhat conservative in that for these numbers. Where do we think this should go? Well, one of the areas that we thought would be of benefit would be where the old government garage site is off of Riverside Drive. For a number of reasons. It continues to revitalize the East End. And I was saying to Mayor Brown, the gentrification of the East End now is quite amazing in terms of what's going on in the remodeling of the homes there. It's close to downtown, so an economic benefit. This is key, quick access to Stratford. Stratford is the largest growing area in PEI. There's a lot of pickleball players there. They have easy access across the bridge to this facility. And it's easy access from Charlottetown. It's also easy access from Cornwall around the highway. Whether there's a requirement for site preparation to be determined. But Tennis Canada has also indicated that they have some funding for preliminary site preparation to evaluate soil, or if there's any additional costs associated with determining estimated costs of the facility or anything like that. So they were on board to help out in that situation, only if the funding model is in place. So we'd have a world-class facility for the city of Charlottetown that would attract a number of people for a variety of different reasons. Or the other alternative would be the event grounds. And the event grounds, well, going back, taking a look at the space here, we've got 6 acres. This facility would be 1.5 acres. Okay, that would take up part of that 6-acre site. The event grounds are 3.5 acres. Again, this would take up 1.5 of the events areas. Same thing, East End, close to downtown, quick access from Stratford, easy access, and again, site prep maybe already there to be determined. Again, a world-class facility. Now, I know the event grounds holds events, but as I mentioned, with that open concept and that 1 acre area within the racket center, then there's an opportunity to again coordinate events, whether it's inside or outside. Right. Timelines, we're on a tight constraint in terms of time. I know we were somewhat behind the 8 ball when we started talking to Adam, recognizing that 2 years comes up pretty quick. And so December, we'd like to say that we would have the approval from all levels by December of this year. January 2021, assigning a project manager or an engineer, and either through the city or through the province, second a high-quality project manager or project engineer to manage this project. February 2021 RFP, and talking to the architects in Halifax, who, by the way, designed the ATC. They also designed the one that hasn't been built yet, but the Dieppe one. They also designed the credit union place in Summerside. But they said if you are on a tight guideline, and they said this can be done, but it would have to be done through either an RFP for the architectural drawings and an RFP for build, Or alternatively, which may make more sense, is you have an RFP for a design build to get it all done quickly. And then there's good communication between the builder and the architect. April 2021 construction, December 22 construction finished, January 2023 official opening, and February 2023 is Canada Games. And Adam has a spot there, he can put the squash folks. Any questions? I went through that fairly quickly.
That's good. Very good. So the reason we didn't go to Parks and Recreation, where it should have went, Councillor Bernard, who was chair of Parks and Recreation, said that it'd be best to present it to council. So here it is in front of council. You see the tight timelines. Any questions?
Have you had conversations with the government over the old garage site?
Other than finding out who it actually belongs to. It belongs to the province. And I talked to John Morrison, and he indicated that it would depend on, it would have to go to the next step, would be Department of Transportation and the infrastructure group. And then because it's Crown land, it would then have to be determined by the Treasury Board as well as the Executive Council for approval.
Because the city of Charlottetown is looking at that lot for the new entertainment event center.
Right, right. And the question is the time frame and whether or not both can coexist. And I don't know what the plans are, what the size that you're looking at. But again, it's 6 acres, and it's again, strategically from our perspective, the facility would be perfect in that area, simply because of the central location to Stratford and Charlottetown and easy access from Cornwall.
So, did I hear you say earlier that you just need 1.5 acres to build a facility?
The facility would actually be 1.5 acres, yeah.
And that includes any parking or anything?
No, that's excluding the parking. That's just the facility.
Just the build.
Right. But if we're talking about a combination, there's obviously shared parking could be done, right?
Well, yeah, like if you're talking the event center, you already have the parking there. And it's, I think, 68,700 square feet, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. But the central area is 45,000, where you can take everything down, the nets for tennis and pickleball. So that whole area is 1.05 acres, just in the center area.
The footprint.
No, just for that center area that would be free for events or anything else that you'd want. So if the Canada Games folks wanted to hold something there, they have 1 acre of a cement slab indoor that they can put whatever they want there.
So did you guys, was there any other locations you looked at besides those two?
No.
I'm just curious.
No. I mean, there was talk of UPI, but the challenge there is another stakeholder. And the reality is that we do think that there's a good reason to have an easy access to Stratford. And we've been through this 2 years ago for squash and tennis. There is no business case unless pickleball is there.
Yeah.
And
it's growing like crazy.
And it's growing. And so we want to make sure there's as best access for pickleball players, easy access for them. And we think that's probably the best site.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be negative, I'm just...
No, I agree, absolutely.
One of the things we were told on that site also was the remediation for the old garage site is anywhere from 2 to 15 million. So I don't know if you guys ever thought of any of the costs, but to put a building there, you're going to be into some costs because of all the work in the soil that have to do all the leakage over the years, oil, contaminants.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing I can say is that if I looked at the site, there's 1.5 acres basically over the north parking lot, and I'm not sure how much contamination would have occurred over there, but that's an area where it could potentially go as well. But it really depends on your future plans and what you think how this might complement it, if in fact that's still a go.
And CADC would be the ones who would talk to us first, the event center.
Yeah, the events grant falls under, I told Bob that. CADC is overseer.
Yeah.
Councillor McLeod?
Thank you very much, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a question on funding. Is Stratford and Cornwall involved at all with any funding? No?
We haven't talked to them, no.
Okay, probably should. Just simply because of shared services, right? We're more with that today than ever, and their residents are certainly going to take advantage of this facility. So I think it'd be a good idea to opposed to both. I mean, it's not going to be a big windfall, but I'm sure they'd be more willing to help out.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah, we've been reluctant until we actually know where the potential site is too. So, yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes,
I just have a thought, like, in a perfect world, if we did our new place over there, events grounds and all that, and then we had you guys on the events grounds in our arena and all that, and all in one area, like that would really pick up that area, but it's going to cost, as Councillor Bernard said, big bucks, right? I mean, because we've been looking at that property for years now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I understand.
You know,
It's.
I mean, but it would be perfect, I mean, for both areas, right?
I think it would be a huge attraction for the city of Charlottetown.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Exits and Enders are perfect.
So if there was land available, say around Simmons, that really wouldn't work because you want
I
to
don't-
close to the bridge.
Well, it would work for me because I live right in that area, but I don't think it's big enough. I don't think there's enough property there to accommodate something like that.
And maybe you're right, I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the plans for the Simmons group, and a hockey rink is smaller than this.
What's that?
A hockey rink would be smaller than this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What's an NHL rink? 180,
185 200 by
200 by
That's the ice glass.
Yeah, yeah. There's not much beyond Simmons. There's just the boards, right?
Yeah.
Councillor Rivard?
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, gentlemen. Great presentation. Can you go back to the slide that showed the time frame that you guys were looking at?
Oh.
Yeah. That's the...
Very aggressive. I mean,
Yes.
I don't know if you followed.
I don't.
We seem to be struggling.
We can make it go
Fire
fast.
Fire station and talk about a multi-use facility, so we kind of operate at a slow pace, if you will. It's fairly aggressive.
It is, and you know, the ATC in Bedford, that was a 10-year project.
I'm just trying to think from you're asking the city in your presentation was $1 million in 2021 and $1 million in 22, correct?
Yeah. Alternatively, unless the infrastructure program
Correct.
kicks in, yeah.
Yeah, but you need to know that. You need to know that soon.
Yes.
If the city's willing to do that.
Yeah.
And we haven't even started
Yeah.
budget talks quite yet. I mean, Chair of Finance.
Yeah, and more importantly, Adam needs to.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, he has to plan for squash and other venues. He's got most of the venues planned, but the squash issue is still up in the air, and but he, you know, Adam's been very supportive, so has Kyle Dudley, and, you know, if there's an opportunity, great, and we think we can move on it if that's a possibility.
A great facility and much needed for a city of Charlottetown. And like as you said, Prince Edward Island. It's just it's gonna happen quick.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, we've stumbled over the fire station for 5 years.
Yeah,
No, more than that.
There's a
More than
reason.
that, 10 years.
And there's a reason for
Fine.
that, Greg. I mean, this year it's just basically yes or no.
Oh, yes.
It's been said that Charlottetown operates at the speed of dark.
Well, this is, could I ask, what's the footprint of the Bedford Center?
The what, sorry?
Atlantic Tennis Center in Bedford?
It's basically six by itself, is it not? 6 indoor courts?
So it'd be 80,000 square feet, Brian?
Yeah, they have multiple parts. So they have also a bubble with 6 courts.
Yeah, but the actual building that they built
itself is the 6 with mezzanine.
With mezzanine.
In between.
So it's
Yeah.
probably
It's
close.
quite similar, I'd say.
In size?
It would be it'd probably be 246 by 234 without this area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Kelly, did you not see the new Atlantic Tech Center? It's quite a facility, right?
So for comparison, the existing warehouse or garage that's down on Riverside Drive now would be about a comparable footprint to what they're proposing to build. So to kind of give you a perspective on the size. So the size of that existing garage.
But it'd go higher. It's 40 feet high, right?
Yeah, 40 feet.
Whereas the garage is about 25.
Well, I mean, depends on I was looking up some of the requirements for, like Davis Cup said 20 feet. think they said, and then international played 40 feet, but typically 30 to 40 feet for a ceiling.
Okay.
You know.
So, as a represent Canada Games, we're here because we think it's a great complex. Our interest in the facility is really just on the squash side, although we see value in having that bigger area as options to do other things with for the Canada Games. But our interest is in the squash. We think it's a great idea for the city, tremendous for sport tourism. Just a note on pickleball, like they are, I think they're currently set up in the Eastlink Trade Center for the winter, and they're actively playing pickleball in the Trade Center, half of the Eastlink Center, because they don't have any space.
They have 4 sessions.
It's exploding.
4 sessions a week.
Sport.
It is?
Right now.
4 sessions a week for 2 hours each session, and they have maximum number of people joining it. Yeah.
So I'm here basically to show that Canada Games does support the facility, the racket center, and I know in talking with them, they would love to see it located in the city of Charlottetown, because that is the best fit from a member's point of view going forward.
Councillor Rivera, do you have a
Thank you.
point to that?
2 things. One, you actually brought one up. I was going to ask about the Trade Center, and if I don't know how high the ceiling is, Wayne, in that facility, but is that even an option if the province were to?
Like I would think that would be kind of the size of about 2 tennis courts.
Is that all it is, the Trade Center piece?
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay, my other question was where are we at with the gymnastic facility for the Canada Games? Is that still in play? Are they just going to?
He's still looking for property.
And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity then the 2 groups together can work and find a facility.
They want their own facility.
They want
They made that clear.
They want a standalone facility just for the Island Gymnastics Academy.
We did approach them to see if there was a. So we did approach them to see if there was a marriage to be made there, and they indicated they would rather continue on their own.
So, Bob, I'm just going to refer back to one thing.
Sure. Slide.
No, it's a question. I know the location would be perfect because it's close to Stratford. So I think there's a lot of players in Stratford that you could see as becoming members in the facility.
Yes.
So is there a reason why you wouldn't ask Stratford for some funding towards the facility?
I mean, that's a good question, and we haven't, we will, but we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
Cornwall. And Cornwall too.
And Cornwall as well.
Yeah, that's just.
Yep. Yep.
That would be nice.
But
to see.
we were sort of trying to figure out.
Yeah. No, for sure. I know you're on a tight timeline.
So Adam, on the ISIP fundings, where could the city, we're looking at the 3rd pad, now we're looking at this possibility. Can Canada Games help with the process?
We would certainly do what we could. Sure, we would support that. The province is the one that threw the idea out that they may look to that infrastructure route to help fund the project. So I don't know if they would suggest that if they thought it was a dead end. I'm not sure.
That was that was John. When I spoke with John Morrison yesterday, we went through the proposal. He was quite enthusiastic and thought the business case was sound, and he thought perhaps the infrastructure funding route might be a way to go.
What do you want to do, Councillor?
Well, I was wondering, and I can see there's a pillar over there for recreation, but I thought most of that money was exhausted.
Yeah, but now you have the COVID-19 resiliency fund. That's another fund. There are 4 areas, one for health, education.
The COVID resilience fund wasn't for recreation facilities.
No, but if you make it expanded, like for example, for the fire station, you can make it such that there's lots of space, that it allows for a lot of physical distancing, not just for now, but in the future.
For funding for these guys.
Well,
under that particular.
Try anything.
Unless they
against the law.
I don't know if you know that or not.
I don't know.
Anyway, that'd be nice to see it built. Nice facility.
Yeah, it would be terrific.
Is this a Parks and Rec thing or just strategic priorities? A new building.
Parks and Rec? working with strategic priorities. That's why I think, Kevin, you want to, Councilor Randy?
Yeah, I just want to say it'd be a fantastic building, but, and I'm like Gary, if you would have, we use some foolish numbers here, like if Cornwall said 200,000 and Stratford said 200,000, so then you're looking at us for 600,000 for each year, especially with your timeline. I mean, but we didn't have those figures, but you're only looking for us to have our part, you know, without those other people sort of paying their way.
Yep.
So, and that's what I'm stuck at. I wish we would have had a conversation with Cornwall and Stratford and see what they're willing to do also. I mean, we shouldn't fund the whole thing ourselves because we did it for years with minor hockey and everything on that line. The user fees and all that, you know what I'm saying, Mike? And it's just that, like if we, like 600,000, which I just thrown out there, would be easier to swallow than $1 million next month.
Yeah.
You know.
Can we just,
I don't think you're going to get that.
can we wrap it
I
up?
mean, you won't get that from them.
A couple of questions. Councillor McLeod, then Councillor Yankoff.
Thank you very much, Rich. So, realistically, with your time frame, I'm concerned about the event center or the government garage, somewhat so-called site, but like you know, there's no, the environmental studies haven't been done as to what's in the ground there yet, and who's going to pay for it. There's all those types of things still moving in the wind, and that's why you know, the events grounds or the event center, everything's kind of on hold, waiting to see what the province is going to do with it. For them to say that they're going to throw that in as a part of their contribution, well, you know, you'd want to be clear as to who's paying for the you know, the site itself, because that's
absolutely.
That's a big chunk of money there if it's contaminated, right? And so you know,
yeah, I mean I'm new at this, and I'm going, okay, where do we start first? And I thought, well, and I got an audience with John Morrison before our meeting here, but you know, I mean, we can talk about to all of them, Stratford and Cornwall as well, but you know, we think it's a good idea. I know the time frames are tight. I mean, that's the big challenge.
That's the scary.
It's really scary, and the build can be done, but the 849 said, yeah, we got to make it happen sooner than later.
Councillor Yankoff, did you have a question?
Yeah, just more about the comment. Thank you, by the way, for your report. You're right, the timelines are tight. As Councillor Duffy said, we're in, what did you call it? Dark times?
So we work at the speed of dark.
Speed of dark, yes. Was there any thought, because where there is available funding, there generally is with net zero green initiatives. So is there any thought put into a net zero footprint building?
That's a good idea. We haven't thought of that. I mean, we can talk to the architects about it, but I mean, they were very good at providing some initial information, but we didn't get too far in discussion because until they know they have a commitment of what they're doing. So, but they were very helpful in giving us some information to establish this footprint.
Can we, Councillor Duffy, did you want to just conclude?
Yeah, the question I had was, it seems as Councillor Bernard talks about remediating the ground there between what was it, Terry,
between 2 and 15.
2 and 15, and it's a big chunk of cash, eh? Whoever takes over ownership of that garage site is going to be hit with maybe hit with a pretty big bill. I think the province, they're going to be the sellers of the building. They could make it a lot more attractive if they'd share the cost. Actually, after all, it's their oil, it's their gas, it's there. It would make, if it's not you people, and if it's not the multi-use purpose, somebody down the line.
It's got to be done.
It's got to be done. And who put the contaminants there? The province did. So I think it'd be to their advantage, for a couple of reasons, to help with that bill. And on the other hand, with the financing from Cornwall and Stratford, they haven't been overly generous to this point in time, sharing with the Carey Centre and various other amenities that they use well. They basically say no, and we say thank you. But then even after they say no, their residents still come in and use the facilities. So there's not, we don't really have a really strong lever to say, oh, if you don't help us with funding, we won't help your residents with participating in the sport. Because that's what it's all about, is getting people to participate, regardless of where they live. That is the price of being a capital city. Anyway, I just leave it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, did you just have a little information there too?
So part of the complication as well is that that current facility is being used by the COVID testing center for the next 2 years. So that place is not going anywhere as for the immediate future.
I mean, it was relocated from Eastlink. It could potentially be relocated again.
We understand that they have no intention to do so. And so the other thing is, have you heard from a head?
You would have been talking to them over the event center.
Has ACOA promised you the $4 million that you have on your chart as well?
No.
And you expect an answer from them by the end of the year as well?
We haven't approached ACOA yet. We've talked to the province as well as yourself. So you were number one on their list, and then we got to the province yesterday beforehand. So
turn down HVAC. So, I think this is.
Yep.
Can you wrap it up? You've wrapped it up. Like, do you have any closing remarks?
Well, I guess any next steps. I mean, we can follow up with Cornwall and Stratford
and ACOA.
And ACOA. We'll continue discussions with the province with regards to the cleanup of the site.
I would have that one discussion too, because Mr. Kelly and I met with South Central Government Affairs, and in Wayne Long, we were talking about the old government grades, and it is frozen for 2 years for the COVID testing.
That was stated to you by government
The province was not here?
They did state that's there for 2 years.
So you want to
Yeah,
have to clarify that, Bob.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be one question that I would ask them.
Okay.
The event ground might be a good option.
Yeah, you're right.
But then you have to work through CADC, and then Imperial Oil of Canada still have a lien on it.
And is there not still some
They have a lien on it,
litigation
because
that
anytime you
needs to
dig
be
in
done?
that ground, CADC has to phone Imperial Oil of Canada.
Adam, you know this. They have to dig in the ground, and they build it on pillars.
I don't think you would be allowed to build in the ground on the event ground site.
Yeah, that's why they made it. That's why. But they're not building on
They
pillars.
could probably drive piles and set it on piles.
More expense.
There'd be a bathroom.
It would be more expense. So you just have to look at those, and Bob, if there's a third site, you and I have spoken about it, third option. Site option. Keep that in mind. I know the university's not your most favorite, but that north end of the camp is starting to open up.
It's too bad we didn't have some more time. Once the third day gets built, and Simmons, we're not sure what we're going to Simmons.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, with an opportunity. I know we're trying to get the candidates, it's not going to happen without. It's too bad because we wouldn't see much.
Yeah. I haven't measured it, but it just visually it just doesn't look like it's big
Oh, no,
enough.
there's more room. There's more room behind the pool. It's right over all the current ground.
On the north end.
Of the Charlottetown Power Center.
Anyways, yeah. But my fear is that if we don't do something about the squash court, some other community's going to take it up.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Adam needs an
it's
answer
precious
somewhere, and I mean that's an option, Councillor. But again, it's that availability to distract folks and everything else. So, and if we don't get the pickleball folks engaged in this, it's not going to. We won't have the numbers that we have on that screen.
The squash has been offered to numerous stakeholders and communities, but it really, to stand on its own is pretty tough. It needs the other racket sports in order to make it sustainable. Right. So that's why it makes sense in this kind of three-sport complex.
Okay, so we'll do some follow-up.
Can you get back to Mr. Kelly? Okay. He's the office of the CAO. So
okay, sounds good.
And then he can do some work with the committees.
Thank you.
Right?
Quickly, we'll do our homework
yes.
very quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have time tonight to get it all done, but.
Hold on.
I'll be back tomorrow. I'll get back to tomorrow, yeah. See you in the morning. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Adam, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Bob.
Your worship, I'm leaving.
Yes, both of you already went through this presentation.
Yes, we were through it Monday with finance.
What's that?
You were also part of it. It's the,
What?
right now we're going through the audit statements.
Why not? I didn't miss a meeting yet in 6 years.
Go wild, go.
I'll have enough. Did you want to stay? Well, they already went through it. Do you have a resolution to pass tonight, or is that going to?
How do you pass the finances?
Yeah, we're still open.
Yeah, we're still open.
Why should, I don't think council should just pass a resolution.
I put the request in earlier that I was leaving.
Okay. You want to start with this?
I sure can.
Thank you. Thank you again for your patience.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
You're all right, Mark? Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michelle Burge and I am one of the partners at MRSB. So it's my pleasure to be here this evening to review the audited statements with you. So you have a package in front of you with 4 different statements. 2 of them are the pension plans for the utility and the city. Then we have the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation, and then we have the consolidated statements. So as the worship mentioned, we'll start with the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation. So what I'll do is highlight some of the significant items in the financial statements. At the end of my presentation, I'll open up the floor if anyone has any questions. We'll certainly try and answer any questions that you may have. I will note that on the audit report, which is a couple pages in on each one of the statements, we are giving a clean audit opinion this year. There is no qualifications. In the past couple years, there has been a qualification relating to inventory and a previous year relating to tangible capital assets. So all of those have now been resolved, and it says in our opinion the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects. The financial position, the situation, the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation at March 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year that it ended in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for the public sector. So that is what we call the standard auditor's report, and we give a clean bill of health on the audit for the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation. So then I'm going to get you to turn to page 1 of the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation financial statement. So this is the statement of financial position. And this gives you a snapshot of the financial position of the corporation at March 31st, 2020 and compared to March of 2019. So the first information is the financial assets, which are about 19.1 million, up from 16.3 in the previous year. The most significant increase there is relating to cash, and that's the timing of a new loan from TD Bank, with the majority of those proceeds only being received in late February, and that's still in cash at the end of the year. In terms of the liabilities, they're at 49.8 million, the next section of information, up from 44.9 million. You can see that the bank indebtedness has been cleared from last year. Last year was 12.3, and now obviously there's cash on hand, obviously with that new loan advance. And due to related party is essentially the loans relating to the corporation. All the loans are actually in the name of the City of Charlottetown, so we reflect them here as a due to related party. However, the utility is obviously responsible for all of the debt service. So you can see that the due to related party, which again is the loans, is up from 28.1 to 41.7, and that is because of about 15 million new loan during the year. And as I said, overall the liability is up from 44.9 to 49.8. And the net debt for the corporation is now at 30.7 million. Again, that's up from 28.6 in the previous year, so it is up slightly overall. The non-financial assets are 127.8 million. The majority of that is the tangible capital assets, or the infrastructure relating to the Water and Sewer Corporation. And that has gone up during the year. There was approximately $21 million in total of capital projects during the year, the majority of that being the wastewater treatment plant, and as well sewer mains, and some other work done in terms of the Miltonville well field. So overall, the accumulated surplus of the corporation is now from 81.1 to 97.1 million overall. So that is an increase of approximately 16 million overall annual surplus for 2020, and I'll go over that in just a moment. So on the next page is the statement of operations for the corporation. So this gives you the information about the revenues, expenditures, and then the overall result for the year. I'm going to focus more on the budget 2020 and actual 2020 columns. The actual 2019, as you may recall, is for 15 months, with the change in that period of time to coincide with the provincial government's fiscal year end, which was March. So that previous year was from January 2018 to March of 2019. So it is a bit difficult to kind of compare 15 months to your normal a 12-month operating cycle. So I'll focus on the budget and the actual for 2020. So the revenues for the corporation, the budget for 2020 was 12.38 million. The actual revenues were 12,636,000. So they are just slightly above budget, about 250,000. Obviously, the biggest part of that is the metered sales, 10.6 million, very close to the budget overall. Just a couple areas that are higher than budget. The unmetered sales still are some, obviously not on the metered system, so they're at about 270,000. And services billed as well, slightly higher than budget. Most of the other areas are fairly consistent.
What was the 270,000?
Pardon me?
The
unmetered sales.
Okay.
Yeah, so the budget is 167 and actually was at 270, so
right.
They're a little bit higher than originally was budgeted.
Okay.
And as I said, overall about 250,000, your revenues are higher than your initial budget that was approved. In terms of the expenditures, the next information, the budget for 2020, the expenditures budget was 13.3 million. The actual expenditures were 12.2 million, so about 1.1 million less than originally budgeted. And in most areas, they are in fact less than budget. The only couple areas that might be up slightly is the very first one, the amortization of tangible capital assets. The budget at 2.5 and actually at 2.9, and that's because of the significant additions during the year or capital projects. The debt interest charges, a little bit less than, again, budget, and the main reason is just the delay or lateness of borrowing the additional funds for capital during the year. So that was late in the year, so obviously less interest than is expected. And then in terms of a few other expenses, the repairs and maintenance, the budget was 2.3 million. The actual is 2,295,000, so again under budget. And wages, very close to budget again, within about 200,000. But overall, the expenditures are about 1.1 million less than the budget. So the operating surplus for 2020 is showing a surplus of $433,948, with obviously an increase in the revenues and expenditures being less than budgeted. The other revenues, the government transfers for capital, the budget was 21.1, the actual was 13.9. The majority of that is clean water, wastewater funding for the various capital projects. And then the municipal capital expenditure grant, the budget was 2.1 million and the actual is 1.6. And that's the 10% grant that's received from the province relating to capital projects.
That's down because the actual capital project were down?
It's hard to estimate, obviously, when you do the budget. You're assuming that a lot of those projects are going to be completed, right. And the actual amount that's being submitted is only on the actual costs that have been incurred and paid before the end of March. So it's always a bit of a timing issue, really.
So that would just go into the next...
Yes, exactly, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So the other revenues then for actual 2020 was 15.6 million. That's being added to your operating surplus of 433,000, resulting in an overall annual surplus of 16 million. And I know I've mentioned this before. Obviously, that surplus is showing a significant number, but the key number to focus your attention on really is the operating surplus, because that's really what is accessible in terms of surplus. The other revenues really are capital funding, and they have actually been spent and used relating to capital projects. It was a number of years ago, this change in terms of how those capital project revenues are presented. They are now always considered part of revenues. So in certain years, it can obviously significantly inflate or change how much your overall annual surplus is for the year. And this is another situation. So so the overall for the corporation is showing a positive operating surplus of about 433,000. I'll leave the other information with you in terms of the Water and Sewer Corporation. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Good. Any questions?
If not, I'll probably go to now the City of Charlottetown Consolidated Financial Statements. It's the thickest package there. So just to kind of clarify in terms of when we talk about the consolidated financial statements, what's obviously combined or consolidated in these statements is obviously the Water and Sewer Corporation, which we just reviewed. It includes Kerry, because obviously the city is a major partner in that particular business enterprise. And it also includes 80% of the Eastlink Center, because again of your relationship and obviously partnership in that organization. And then of course it would obviously include the city revenue and any other committees or subcommittees that are accountable to the city. So when we talk about consolidated, all of those various entities and their financial results are included here in these consolidated financial statements. On the audit report on the city consolidated, a couple pages in, again under the opinion, it says in our opinion the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the city of Charlottetown at March 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year then in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for the public sector. So this is again what we call a standard auditor's report, and we do give a clean bill of health, and as you've noticed, there is no qualifications or issues that we've noted this year, so it is a clean audit opinion this year that we're issuing. So on page 1, I'll get you to turn to that page. Again, this is the statement of financial position, a consolidated statement at the end of March of 2020, and as well compared to the prior year, March 2019. So first of all, the financial assets are $44.6 million. And that's up from 11.4 million. And financial assets essentially mean they're cash or near cash or liquid. So that's what you have available in terms of near cash assets. And the majority of that increase, as you can see, is the very first line of cash, which is 31.5 million. And again, as we just noted on the Water and Sewer Corporation, it's the timing of when that new capital loan was advanced. So there was $35 million new loan in late February, and the majority of that was obviously still available in cash at the end of the year. So that has significantly improved the cash position at that particular point in time.
Michelle, so of the 31,543,000, 219 restated, it's blank?
Yes, and actually if you go down...
because of a loan.
Yeah, well actually, we'll see right below under the liabilities, there's a bank indebtedness in the prior year of 215,000. So on a comparative basis, you went from an overdraft of 200,000 to a positive having amounts in the bank of the 31 million. Yeah.
And that's what we got for, I believe it was 20 years at 2.35.
Yeah.
2.87.
2.87. Yeah.
2.87. 2.87.
A lot of them could have done too.
Good deal.
Okay. So then the next information is the liabilities. Again, on a consolidated basis, the total liabilities, 143 million, up from 109 million in the previous year. A couple items are up. The accounts payable have increased, and that's again mostly relating to timing issues. A number of capital project bills outstanding for some of the larger suppliers that we're working on, particularly the wastewater treatment plant. The deferred revenue is at 9.5 million. About 6.6 million of that is your gas tax funds. That is funds that you still have available to carry forward into this fiscal year for your capital projects. And then we have the long-term debt up from 82.4 million to 110 million, and that would be the 35 million additional loan during the year. Yeah. So as I mentioned, overall your liabilities up from 109 to 143. The majority of that really is that new loan with TD Bank for 35 million. So if you look at your financial assets are 44.6 million, your liabilities are 143 million. You're obviously in a net debt situation where you don't have enough cash to obviously, or near cash to obviously pay off all of the debts that you have. So you're at 98.4 million in terms of net debt. That's very similar to your situation last year. So you're kind of maintaining your net debt, although you've added a significant amount of debt during the year. But things have obviously changed somewhat in terms of having cash available at the end of the year. The non-financial assets then are 262.5 million, up from 239 the previous year. The majority of that number, again, is the tangible capital assets, so this would be the infrastructure within the city, the utility corporation, and all of those related entities. And during the year, there was about 10 million spent by the city on capital projects, and as we just saw in the Water and Sewer Corporation, about 21 million, so about 31 million in total was spent on various projects during the year. The majority of that being for the city, about 3 million in road infrastructure, about 3 million in storm sewers, and then on the Water and Sewer Corporation, just about 12 million on the wastewater treatment plant. So when you take your net debt and your non-financial assets, the overall accumulated surplus of the city is $164 million at the end of the year, up from 141.2 in the previous year, so that's an increase of 23.2 million. I'll show you that in just a moment, but again, a lot of that has to do with the capital funding received during the year. Any questions there? No questions? Okay. So on the next page, on the Consolidated Statement of Operations, I'm just going to focus on the budget and the actual 2020 columns. So the revenues, the budget for 2020 was $70 million, and the actual for 2020 is $72.3 million. So your revenues are actually about 2.2 million greater than your original budget. A couple of the key areas, and one of the most significant ones is the very first line, the property taxes. So the budget for property taxes was 34.1 and the actual was 35.6, so about almost 1.5 million more than budget, and that obviously comes back to significant growth and development within the city, increased in assessed values. The government transfers for operations, that's a bit higher than budget at 14.3. Most of that would be the municipal support grant from the province. And then the other areas are fairly consistent. The only other one would be recreation. The budget was 3.5 and the actual is 4.5. Those numbers would include Kerry and the East Link in terms of their revenues. When you look purely at the city's recreation programming, it obviously would be only a small portion of that. So as I said, overall the revenues are more than budget, about 2.2 million. In terms of the expenditures, the budget was 72.3 million and the actual is 66.6 million, so about 5.6 million less than budget. And most of the areas, again, are under budget. In terms of amortization, the budget was 8.1 and the actual is 8.5. Protective services, the budget was 13.5 and the actual was 12.5. Street maintenance and environment, the budget was 13.2 and the actual is 11.9. And water and sewer, as we just saw, as well, is under budget. So pretty much every category is under budget compared to what was approved initially. And that total is about 5.6 million less than budget. So the operating surplus on a consolidated basis for the city is 5.6 million. The other revenues, the next section then, the majority of that is relating to capital project funding. The first one being the government transfers for capital. The budget was 25.6, the actual was 16.6. The majority of that again would be, as we just noted on the utility statement, just about 14 million is clean water, wastewater, and then we have 3.1 million from gas tax, and then a few other smaller infrastructure programs. The municipal capital expenditure grant, the actual is 2.4 million of the 10% you're eligible for on your capital expenditures. Then we have donation revenue, so that was the land donated by Andrews, that's 416,000. Then we have the pension expense for the year based on the actuary review of the service and investments, obviously. The overall current service cost is 510,000 for those employees on the pension plan. Sick and post-employment service benefits for staff. The current service cost is 313,000. So overall, those other revenues are 17.5 million, with the majority of that obviously being relating to capital funding. And then the annual surplus is 23.2 million. Again, with 17.5 of that, or about 18 million of that obviously being relating to capital project funding, which, as I mentioned, is a change of a number of years ago that now those revenues are included and considered as part of your annual surplus. However, obviously they have been already spent in terms of capital projects. And that 23.2 million is being added to your accumulated surplus from the previous year to bring the total now to 164 million overall accumulated surplus.
But that was the 23.2 million that you talked about. That was part of the changes in the accounting practices, correct?
This was quite a number of years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, that that was the new presentation, that it's required that any capital project funding is considered as revenues in the year that you actually receive it.
So that revenue you're talking about is if we do a project that includes funding from federal, provincial, that 2/3 funding.
Yes.
We front it. And once the project's over, they pay us back their 1/3. That comes into here as revenue. We spend on the project.
Yes.
So it's not like it's revenue sitting in the bank.
Right? No, that's right. We've already basically had to pay them, the contractor or supplier in terms of doing that project, and then you're receiving your funding. Yeah. And as I said, essentially, you know, when you talk about the annual surplus, that's already been spent because you've had to, you know, do work on those particular projects in order to get that funding.
Which is sometimes hard to for the layperson to understand. I don't know us. Like the donation revenue of 416,000, and that's a donation to the city. And that's, I guess that's what the value of it is, but it comes in as a cash donation.
Well, it shows as revenue, and then on the other side we see an increase in obviously your land value for the city as well. So again, it's something that, depending on those significant events that may happen in a particular year, that can sway or fluctuate what your annual result might be.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, just a question for clarification. If I look at the Water and Sewer Corporation statements that you just went over first,
yes,
right? The revenue, total revenue is 12 million. The actual 636 million. But in the consolidated, it's 11,438,000. Can you just explain that?
I sure can. When we do,
and that's the same for the expenditures too.
Yes, yeah. So when we do consolidated statements, another requirement that we have to do is we have to what we call eliminate anything that's goes between the various entities. So what's been excluded, where we just saw that water and sewer revenue being higher than what we're presenting here, we are excluding, the main part of that is the water, fire rated water, which is about 1.1 million.
Okay.
And then we also exclude for any municipal buildings that are obviously paying the sewer and water bills on a quarterly basis to the from the city to the corporation, those are excluded as well. You're required to basically exclude any transactions that happen between the entities, yes.
And that'd be the same for expenditures too.
That's exactly right. So there's a rent that's paid between the city and the utility that's excluded. As I said, on the revenue side, it's mostly that fire rated water, but there is other expenses as well.
So just a second question, clarification.
Sure.
For the consolidated surplus, you have it 5.6 million?
Yes.
So if I took the 433,000, could I subtract that and say that's the city's corporations?
There would also have to be excluding whatever Cary had and Eastlink had, but their profits are very minimal.
Yes, there are more expenses to us than...
Yeah, I think it's very, you would be very close in terms of how much would be the city revenue itself, but I don't have that number right in front of me.
No, that's all right. I'm sure it's not that huge.
No, it's probably not a significant difference if you just subtract that. The other item that I will refer you to then is on page 23 of these financial statements, just for a moment. So at the top of page 23, the note number 19, in terms of the accumulated surplus, I think it's important to obviously always clarify when we have such a significant number in the accumulated surplus. And as we kind of discussed, this was a presentation change a few years ago, which does, inflate the surplus numbers with how now the tangible capital assets and the grants relating to those are presented. So now you are presenting and showing that a tangible capital asset is the full cost, where in the previous presentations you would only basically be showing your perhaps 1/3 if it was 2/3, 1/3 funding. So when we look at the total accumulated surplus, as we just noted, at 164 million, the investment in tangible capital assets is 150 million of that total. So that has already been spent. You've already invested that part of your surplus back into infrastructure. You have those buildings, you have the fire trucks, you have the water and sewer utility, you have all of those assets. So really what you have in fact relating to unrestricted surplus is about $11 million in terms of that total surplus. And that number can obviously still fluctuate because there's a lot of timing issues of when you're making commitments and when things are being committed to in terms of projects and expenses going forward. So I think that's important to kind of clarify that.
Yep.
Is there any, no, I was just going to kind of finish up on that.
Yep.
Report. Is there any questions there?
Yeah, right there, Deputy.
The other statements are the pension statements. I'm not sure if anyone wanted to go over those ones or not.
Just quickly.
Quickly? Okay. We'll do the Water and Sewer Corporation superannuation plan. So this one is noted that the year end is December 31st, so it's not the same as the city and the Water and Sewer Corporation. The plan is obviously a registered plan with Canada Revenue Agency, and the plans normally have to stay on the calendar year on that basis. So these numbers are reflective as of December 2019. When we have the consolidated financial statements, the numbers included are for March 31st. We've had the actuary compose the numbers relating to that period of time. So I think the important page probably is page 1, the statement of financial position. So this is for the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation superannuation plan. So the assets of the plan at the end of December of 2019 were 10.3 million. At the end of last year it was 9.8 million, and the majority of that number is the long-term investments. So the investments in both of the plans are obviously invested with an outside third party. So they have invested those particular investments relating to the pension plan. So that's a Burgundy Balanced Pension Fund, and the market value at the end of December was 10.3 million, the long-term investments. The previous year was 9.7, so they have increased from a combination of the annual contributions, the growth during the year, and obviously just what the value of those assets were at the end of the year. There's not a lot of liabilities relating to the plan. They're about 120,000. So the net assets available for benefits is 10.2 million, and the accrued pension obligation is 10.1 million. So that accrued pension obligation is essentially the obligation to the employees of the Water and Sewer Corporation. So at the end of the year, at the end of December, there is a small surplus in the Water and Sewer Corporation pension plan of about $147,000. The previous year there was a deficit of about 476, but it has come to the positive. Just a quick, on the next page, in terms of the increase in assets. The increase in assets increased about 1.3 million, but the majority of that is from an increase in the fair value of long-term investments, 717,000. It's always important to clarify that when these financial statements are prepared, it's a point or a day in time. So it's at December 31st, that's the market value of those investments that day. If maybe you looked on March 17th, 2020, when everything had to shut down, it probably wasn't that nice. So it can fluctuate year to year depending on what that day may have done, what Trump may have said in that day, right? And then the decrease in assets would be the various benefit payments and administrative costs. So the overall change for the year was 592,000. That's what has increased essentially the surplus for the year, and the majority of that is because of that fair value adjustment during the year. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of the Water and Sewer Corporation superannuation plan.
How many does that cover?
It's about 6.
6?
There's five or six members that are still contributing.
Yeah, but not the other members. All the other members are part of city.
It's kind of proposed in 2000.
Yes, oh no, I remember that.
Anyone who's come on since is part of the city council.
Thank you.
So the other statement that I'll refer you to then is the City of Charlottetown Superannuation Plan. So this is for the city employees. So again, I'm going to get you to refer to page 1, which is the statement of financial position. Of course, this is again at December of 2019 compared to December of 2018. So the assets of the superannuation plan at the end of December of 2019 were 93.5 million, up from 83.5 million the previous year. Again, the most significant number of that is the long-term investments at 92.9 million, up from 82.5. So again, those are the investments that are with Burgundy Investments, and that's the fair market value at that point in time. Again, there's very little in terms of accounts payable or liabilities of 122,000. So the net assets available for benefits is 93.4 million. The accrued pension obligation, in terms of what the city's obligation is to the employees based on years of service and those calculations, is 86.7 million. So there is a surplus in the city pension plan at the end of December of 6.7 million, up from 1.7 million at the end of December of 2018. If I get you to turn to the next page, we can obviously see where, again, the majority of that has arisen from. The increase in assets during the year, the change or increase in fair value was 6.1 million. And again, this is a day or point in time when, at that point in time, the markets were quite good. So there was an increase in the value of those investments by 6.1 million. The investment income was about 4.6 million, which is dividends and interest earned on those investments during the year. So the overall increase was 14.3. The decrease in assets is 4.3 million, with the majority of that being the benefit payments to retired members of the plan, resulting in a change in net assets available for benefits of 10 million. Again, with the majority of that being that change in fair value, leading to 93.4 million available for benefits at the end of the year. And as I said, overall, the surplus at the end of the year at 6.7 million. When we went over the consolidated financial statements, obviously you didn't see that as an asset on the consolidated statements. And the reason for that is obviously that surplus is not accessible or available or allowed to be used, obviously, for the surplus of city operations. No. So that is a number that's excluded from the surplus in a current year, because that cannot be used for anything other than obviously the plan. And obviously that number can fluctuate almost day to day in terms of really what is available and accessible in terms of that plan. So.
And it's a defined pension too.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Anybody have any questions?
Is the same rule apply to provincial pension plans?
No.
No, they use it. Same as the feds.
As far as it can't be touched?
I mean, probably technically that should be, but I know that
they touched it.
They do borrow from it, or there is unfunded liabilities, I guess essentially. Yeah.
Back in the early 2000s, it was completely, almost totally unfunded.
Right.
That's why we had to make those huge injections of money, or the province did.
The province did, yes. Yeah.
To balance it out. They spent it all. And the feds are the same way, I believe, too, right? And they spend their, well, they can do with the EI benefits. They do with the EI.
Yes, yeah.
Could I just ask the percentage? Is it, are we paying what, Mr. Kelly, 9.8? What's our percentage contribution to the pension?
10.93%.
10.9?
10.93, Your Worship.
And that's both employee and employer?
Yes, Your Worship. That's in the city plan. In the one for the utility, I think it's 3.87% contribution from the employee, and we pay the balance, Your Worship.
Yeah, that's the small, the 8-person plan?
Yes.
Well, it's more than 8 there's 6 or 7 that are contributing, but there's a number that's still retired under that plan, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councilor McKay?
I don't know. Someone can close me down after. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I think it does show that all the hassles that we went through the last year and a half, it's turned out to be a good
budget
in both water and sewer and city council.
And Your Worship, with that being said, moved by Deputy Mayor Cody, second by Councilor Rivard, be resolved that the City of Charlottetown approves and accepts the following financial statements as prepared by management and audited by MRSB for the year March 31st, 2020. The City of Charlottetown Consolidated Financial Statements, the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation Financial Statements, the City of Charlottetown Superannuation Plan, and the Charlottetown Water and Sewer Corporation Superannuation Plan, Your Worship.
Okay. So we have the mover, Deputy, Cody, Councilor Rivard. All those in favor?
I just want to say, Your Worship.
Oh, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I do. I just want to, as previous chair, and we just handed the reins over to Jason. But I do want to thank the Finance Committee, which is comprised of Greg Rivard, Mike Duffy, Kevin Ramsey, and yourself for the last 2 years. I think, like I say, this shows that we did our homework, we did a good job. So, thank you to the Finance Committee.
And there's money in the bank, right, Mr. Kelly, to look at some different projects.
To keep an eye on all worship, pay the bills, yes.
Of course, don't tell Mark Flanagan. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Councillor Duran?
No.
Against?
Yes.
Okay, so 6-1. Is there more resolutions?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, that's it. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Yes, Your Worship.
Yes, good news.
Okay, thank you very much. Michelle, thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
And is that letter going to be in the mail, Michelle?
Pardon me?
Is that letter, the management letter in the mail?